All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out, those of you who are here on time. Thanks, shout out to y'all. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started. The definition of marriage through like the technical term is the legally or formally recognized union of a man and woman in some states, same sex, as partners in a relationship. So there are many people who are in love with the idea of being married and not necessarily the work that it takes to go into that. There are people who are in long-term relationships and just don't see the point in getting married. There are people who are engaged for long-term just because they're fear of commitment. So because of that, there are also people who've been married a lot of times, divorced a lot of times, and that keeps working for them. So we're going to talk about that and so much more because tonight's show is called Marriage, the Real, the Good, the Bad, and the Real. So tonight I want to introduce the panel that I have up here with me. To the far right, we have Ken Barnes.
Hello. How's everybody?
Ken, what is your status?
Single. Happily single.
And then I have, and then to my direct right, we have Mr. Anthony Davis.
Very happily married.
To me. And then to my left, I have Mrs. Jean Woodson. And to my far left, I have Elder Neil Woodson.
Hello, everyone.
And how long have you two been married?
We've been married 36 years. Praise God.
Praise
Amen.
God. That deserves a hand clap.
All right.
And then, of course, I always encourage audience participation. I know it's kind of late right now, but, if you guys have any questions, comments, I always ask audience questions. Y'all can feel free to come up to the mic and give your opinion. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right into it. Before I get to the questions, I want to go over some interesting statistics that I saw online. So as of 2016, marriage rates and divorce rates in the U.S. are decreasing. However, almost 50% of all marriages in the U.S. will end in divorce or separation. Researchers estimate 41% of all first marriages end in divorce, 60% of second marriages end in divorce, and 73% of third marriages end in divorce. The average first marriage lasts about 8 years, and 60% of all divorces involve individuals ages 25 to 39. So when I saw those statistics, they were a little interesting to me.
It's not a mistake, Jen. It's not a mistake that's occurring. It's not inherently the institution of marriage as we know. The institution of marriage as we know was just set up wrong. Don't get me wrong. It has its merits. It has its benefits. But it's just set up to fail. It's just set up to fail. So if you want to get married to someone, you find somebody you like, and you both agree that you like each other. You go down to the courthouse and you grab a marriage certificate, and 2 weeks later, you can say I do. You get someone as distinguished as the elder to meet you and marry you. That can happen. Now, in the best case scenario, you would do a little bit more than that. The elder would speak with you and your significant whomever, and he would counsel you and guide you and give you a little guidance before you did it. But it's not a requirement. Right. And unfortunately, by and large, that's what we see happening. People are ill-prepared for the institute of marriage before they get into it.
This is true. And we're going to touch on some of that, too.
Say, though, because marriage wasn't instituted to fail, first of all. Marriage was ordained by God, and being that it was ordained by God, there's no failure in God. It's man who fails the marriage and the institution. So, therefore, if man follows God's steps, then the marriage will be successful. So, again, we get caught up in the stats, which is there. However, again, it's because people have fallen away from what God has ordained as the road map to marriage. So therefore, if we get back on tune with God, then I think those statistics will continue to dwindle down, and you won't have as many individuals filing for divorce. People just throw their hands up when a little incident takes place. Well, I quit. I don't want to play no more. And that's ridiculous. But what you said about the counseling and just anybody can go do whatever they want to do, that's true.
Yeah,
and that's where we have the problem.
Confuses me. Like I said, for me, never being married, I've had the opportunity to see a lot of my friends and family and folk take on that challenge. And, I mean, we're talking church folk that were deeply immersed in the Word, and they just aren't making it. And I say to you that if you were to ask me, before you were able to marry anybody, oh, no, you can't just say I want to get married. You got about a 6-month training course, complete with a certificate at the end, and some test questions and an examination before you can be allowed to be married to somebody. It's a promise you make to God. It's supposed to be forever.
Now
people are falling way short of forever.
Now, before we elaborate on that,
test question.
So all of that, I want to ask. I'm going to direct a couple of questions to some of you individually. You can, if you feel like you want to jump in on that question too, feel free. I want to start with Ms. Jean. What does marriage mean to you?
A long commitment of love, friendship, trust, honesty, and happiness.
Okay. Now, from a man's point of view,
Please.
This one.
To me, when you marry someone, you really become one. So whatever actions you take as a pair, whether or as a team, whether you do it individually or not, it's something that's going to affect the union. So my biggest thing is, when you understand that your relationship, your marriage consists of being just one entity, a unity, if you hurt that person, you're hurting yourself. If you do something wrong to that person, you're doing something wrong to yourself. If you do something that's positive or you achieve success, you achieve that success together. And no one should ever be able to come between that. That's what marriage means to me.
Okay. Ken.
Yes.
I want to ask you a question.
Go right ahead.
Do you believe that it's ideal to cohabitate?
Let me tell
prior
you
to
I think that ultimately, if you're going to do it, it should be for a short period of time. If you're going to do it, it should definitely be goal-oriented and time-stamped. I'll tell you that not being married has given me the opportunity to have relationships that have started off. Every person I've ever met since I was 15 wanted to get married. And I've lived with folk. And like you said, you start off with the best intentions. And then somewhere along the line, just little by little, things just fall apart. Lose sight of the goal, the big picture. You go stop saying we and start saying me, mine, I.
That's good. It's interesting that you say that, because my next question was actually going to be for you guys, because you've been married the longest. What do you think are some factors that contribute to a good relationship? So, like how things start.
I can tell you when we're wrong. I can tell you when we're wrong.
Well, factors, and the number one factor, and actually when we got married, we didn't even know about this factor, is God. That's the number one factor that contributes to a good marriage. And he's the one that needs to direct the marriage. He's the one that you need to look towards when you're having difficulty. Other factors are respect, communication, of course, love, and sincerity.
Elder.
It's and the reason why I'm pausing, respect, communication is very important, and compromise. People run into marriage and they have issues, and instead of respecting one another, instead of compromising on the issues, and instead of communicating, they drift apart. And that's the reason why you have the dysfunction that you have. So again, those factors is what's going to be the glue to contributing factor to marriage lasting. I mean, with us, we've gone through a whole lot of trials and tribulations.
Right.
And again, if it wasn't for God, we wouldn't be sitting here. That's just bottom line. And I know some people might not believe that, understand that, but that's just the real deal. As part of your show is called. That's the real deal. It's God who sustains the marriage. And if you don't trust him, then, it's going to be difficult. I'll let my wife speak because I can see she's ready to say.
And also, Elder, if you could, please, and I would love to hear from you, ma'am, we're going to need some real world, as you so eloquently put it, tangible, day-to-day. What you mean you don't have the money for the bills? How come you didn't take out the trash? Why did you leave the toilet seat up? Kind of survival skills if people are going to be successful in a marriage. Because it's those things that trip people up the most. You'd be the minutia, the things that, you could say, I'd like to have God here, but when you get down to it, it's the nuts and bolts of it. 50 years, the person I married is not going to look the same. had the same views, smell the same, shower the same as they did. And these are factors that are true, real-world issues that could drive you away from a person.
I think going with my husband, God, we didn't know God initially, but we had to learn that. We had to learn about God. Communication, I say to everyone, I think that's the most important thing. That's the key thing that brings out trust, learning to trust someone because you're talking to them, you're communicating with them. Honesty, the respect, all those things stem out of communicating. With you communicating, you learn about God. So so I think the most important thing is the communication, and all the other things will come about.
May I ask a question of the panel, and please consider it. Do you think that currently the way that marriage is set up legally, not from a spiritual perspective, but just legally, needs to be reformed and reviewed? And I'll give you this. So you can get married in the state of Maryland at 18, if I'm not mistaken. 18, you can say, I do, I'm supposed to be with this person for 50 years. And we both know that most 18-year-olds aren't emotionally mature enough to be able to deal with the nuances of a marriage. You can get out of it anytime you want to. I don't like you, you don't like me, cool. We grab ourselves a nice little lawyer, we march on down the road. And then towards the end of it, if you've dealt with the person for a long period of time, I mean, we're talking pensions and alimony and just the way that it's set up, not from a spiritual perspective, but from a legal perspective, has to be reformed. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to get in, a lot more difficult to get out, and you are forced as a couple to try to work through the small stuff that people are so comfortable with saying, oh, I'm done, I'm out, see you. And just a reform. If you would ask me, marriage, the institute needs to be reformed. And I always say, I make jokes about all the time, marriage reform. You can't be 18 and marry somebody without having done this is the required training necessary.
But you can be 18 and join the Army. You can be 18 and do quite a few things. So, I mean, some people are more mature. Sometimes I feel like age is just a number. Because at 18, some people are more mature than the average 32-year-old or a 50-year-old.
So in order to make sure that we have a certainty with that, I mean, there are some things, you're right, you can join the military and do other things at 18, but there's a required examination and degree of certainty that we have before you are eligible to do that. Like, for instance, if you want to shoot, I'm a police officer. To be a police officer, you got a required training course. To drive a car, you take a training course. You get certified. Just because you emotionally feel like you're ready doesn't necessarily prove to be true, but you can be certified. You can take a training course into finances, anger management, child rearing, employment, job training. And these are things that you need to be able to do proficiently to stem off some of the issues that may confront you in a marriage. And we can do that. Please do that.
I think the most important thing, or the first thing, is marry for the right reason. Marry the right person for the right reason. People get married for money. They get married because they want a comfortable living, or they get married because they feel pressured by their partner, or she looked good,
he looked good.
So
or they're pregnant.
Yeah, exactly. So when you go into a marriage for the wrong reason, it's a lot easier for it to fail.
What's the right reason?
Love is the main reason, but it's not the only reason. When you love someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're right for each other or it's going to work. I think you have to have love, and you have to have God, and you have to have trust. Well, God comes on top of all of that, but you have to have trust, and trust is a big thing. It used to be an issue with me until I learned later on in life that a lot of the trust issues that I had was because of my own insecurities. I wasn't the man that I should have been, and so I thought that maybe the woman that I was with, maybe she's not the woman that she should be. So, when you have the right person, now, this is my lovely wife right here. This is my better half, and I really feel like we are one. If she's sick, I feel sick. If she's happy, I'm happy. And another thing is, you mentioned compromise. Compromise is huge. When you go into a marriage, there's going to be some things you're going to have to give up. You may not want to. but you got to give up. You have to. Yeah. You'll learn that. You'll learn that.
You're gonna learn it. See, you got it wrong. That's where your problem is.
Yeah.
But while you have the mic, I actually wanted to gear this question towards you. So, as I know that you know how this goes, oftentimes now we see people idolize relationships. So the popular thing is hashtag relationship goals, or people are like, oh, I want to be like, Michelle and Barack, or the latest Gucci Man and
Jay-Z
such and such,
and
Jay-Z and Beyonce. So with that being said, how do you feel about that? Like, do you think that is okay that people do that, or
I mean, I think it's kind of fun to talk like that, but at the end of the day, you have to focus on what you have and your relationship and what you want out of it. It's fun to see, Jay-Z and Beyonce, they're doing good, at least in our eyes. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but they're putting up a front. They did fight in the elevator.
We all saw that. They were fighting in the elevator.
Yeah.
We saw that.
Yeah. So, I have a great relationship with my wife, and I think a lot of people see that and I don't want to say admire it, but I think they like it. But what they don't see is that things are not perfect in our home. But I had a discussion with the elder before the show, and I told him the one thing that amazes me about my relationship is that we'll have a small little argument or disagreement about something, and it never fails. Every time, it takes no more than 20 or 30 minutes, it's completely forgotten. How many times does that happen? A lot. But it's and the thing about it is when you have that kind of love and you have that kind of togetherness, that oneness, you don't want to keep that hatred and that madness bottled. You want to get past that because you want to get back to the goodness. And that can only happen if you're with the right person that you can have that oneness with.
Now with the real on that, since that is the show, I agree 100%, but I will say I'm going to speak for myself. For most women, we do linger with, we do linger with, we don't. Right, with our emotions. We linger with it's something minor or it could be an argument. We don't let it go as fast. But again, back to what you were saying, depending on who you're with and the communication, and like you said, when you love someone, you don't feel it's like at a point where you're like, it's not even that serious. Like, we laugh more than we do fight. So it's like I want to get back to that and not more so focusing on the fact that like I got a whole attitude with you. You know what I mean?
Can I, but see, that's the beauty, and it goes back, and I'm going to keep harping on this about God. That's the beauty of God, because when he put two people together, there's differences, although they become one. And the difference is, you will be emotional when stuff is going on, and you might hold on to it, but God has blessed a man to be able to let it go. So therefore, it's not two fighting. You might still have some feelings, but we done moved on.
So it's like we fighting with ourselves.
So, right. Right. And then once we get over that, then we come together, and now we work it out. See, whereas if we had this same elevation of anger for such a long period of time, well, now we both would be fighting at the same time. See, and that's, again, the beauty of God. And you actually try to get the spiritual piece out of it when he was talking about the regulation of laws and all that. It's impossible because God has ordained it. So you have to keep them in the picture, and you have to keep them ordering the steps.
Now, I will say, I want to touch base. I'm sorry. I want to touch base on what you said, because for those that don't know, Elder Neal was our marriage counselor prior to getting married. And if anything, I think that was the biggest takeaway that I took, is that we communicate differently. If I'm upset, I want to talk about it right now. If he's upset, he wants a minute, let me calm down, let me walk away, let's come back to it. So you can't force a person to be on the same level as you are, because if y'all both escalated, nothing is going to get solved. And I learned that the hard way, but it you know what I mean? It worked. Right. So I agree with that. Go ahead, Ken.
I still believe it's an outdated, failed institute. Let me say this to you. So marriage has been around for centuries, for decades. And at its core, right? Okay, so at its core, at its inception, it had a design purpose and a design structure. And that structure is different now. Now, I'm not saying get rid of it, but it has to be reviewed, revamped, and rehabbed if we're going to be successful moving into 2017. And you're right, I do believe there has to be a spiritual center to the connection that you have with the person. I'm with you on that. However, it needs to be spelled out, clear, and it just needs to be identified because people are not successful, Elder. It's just not working. It's not working currently.
You're right. And I'm just going to say this, I'm going to move. It is spelled out. It's called B-I-B-L-E.
Okay.
You see, and the folk are not following the spelling of the B-I-B-L-E and the G-O-D. See, that's the key to all the success of marriage. And no matter how you try to shake it, bake it, or whatever you want to do with it, you have to put God in it. So I'm going to leave it alone.
So in 2017 right now, we've got it's been some advances in marriage. There has been some reform over the past year or so. Men can marry other. I'm just talking about it's happening. It's legal. We're going to speak on it. Men can, if they chose to, marry other dudes, and women can marry other women. Not judging. I don't judge. Do you? But it is a fact that is now considered to be marriage, ordained and conducted by ministers, priests, and elders. So when I say to you right now that reviewing marriage, not from necessarily just a spiritual perspective, but from a legal perspective, we got to talk about that because it's different than it was when it was conceived for Adam and Eve, man and woman. This is what you do. Here's all you got. You ain't got the internet. You ain't got Snapchat. You don't have. There wasn't nobody else really around to cheat with at the time initially, so that wasn't a factor. It's different than it was in its inception. And so with regards to the Bible and a biblical approach to it, fine, I'm with it. Pull the excerpts out that I could use on a day-to-day to strengthen my union with this person. Because all I know is I ain't liking her too much right now, and I'm not happy. So we can get those day-to-day survival tips. Here's what you do. Here's how you confront the common things that affect marriage: infidelity, finance issues, trust issues. Fine, pull the excerpts out. We can pin it on a wall. Wait, page 44 says this is.
But if that will help make it work,
right?
then that's why we
I'm with
should
you.
do.
That's why I'm referring to the elder. That fine, if you're going to say that we want to refer to God and we want to use a biblical approach to this union, then we're going to need some excerpts and some tips pulled because it's just not something that the average couple seems to be able to do successfully.
So let me ask you this. On to the next
Me?
question.
Oh, please
yeah,
ask
you, because I know you like to talk.
Oh, I'll tell you all about it. What are you talking about?
Okay, so you haven't been married.
Never.
Have you been pressured to propose?
Every woman I've ever dated since I was 15 had that as her, the first few months it was a conversation. And since I was 15. So somewhere along the line, in their childhood, infancy, or somewhere along, they were told that you meet a guy, you like him, you date him, you take a liking to him, and then your next step is to try to get to the point where you can marry him.
Do you think that pressure put a strain on the relationship that you guys had?
There were a few ladies who, because of the fact that I wasn't moving in a timely fashion. Some people had for instance, let's keep it 100. Some people had a year as a time frame that I meet you, I like you, we share this, that, and the third, and we should be moving towards the altar. If it ain't happening in a year, I'm moving on, you're not moving fast enough. Some people had it at a different time frame, and that's realistic, that they wanted to be married within a year. And so my question becomes, well, do you just want to be married, or do you want to be married to me? Do you have what it takes to be in a house with me for 50 years? Can we survive? Or is it just you want to be married to somebody because you have that as an objective in your life, period? And there's an interesting, it didn't work. It didn't work. None of them.
Obviously.
Girl, finger nice and fresh. Fingers nice and fresh. So it didn't work. So again, I'm with the elder 100%. That there needs to be a spiritual connection, but that spiritual connection needs to be drafted from the Bible and applied to real world 2017 experiences. Because right now, I see marriage going, like I said, you got dudes marrying dudes and girls marrying girls, and I guess cats and animals. And I don't know what's next. Don't know what's next.
Next question. This is for you, Anthony. Do you think that it is advisable to include friends and family in your relationship?
I think it's always good to share fun times and good stuff and accomplishments and achievements. I think the negative stuff or the challenges should be worked out between the man and the wife, or the husband and the wife, or the couple. no one else should be able to have input in how you resolve issues because no one else is living in your relationship. So I would say it's ill-advised.
Yeah. I agree. Wait, I got a question for the audience in a second. I know you'll get up. Wait a minute. So I want to ask you guys as a couple. Personally, I think that, and this is my opinion, I don't think marriage is valued, not even just marriage, relationships aren't valued the same as how it was when we were growing up and seeing our parents and our grandparents, like even our great-grandparents. Like I remember my great-grandparents were 90-something years old, still married. I don't see that as much anymore. Do you think how people were raised or their environment reflects their views on marriage and relationships?
I just spoke on that. We have more stuff that we have access to now than we did.
Let me try to, because it was a lot there that my mind was another place, but I know that the Bible tells me, and again, one, there's nothing new under the sun. That's what it tells me. It tells me also that the two becomes one. Okay. It also tells me when he who findeth a wife findeth a good thing. So if I put all of that together, then I have to understand that my wife, who I found, was given to me by God. It also tells me that also. I think part of the problem is we search as opposed to waiting for God to bring. And when you search, you end up finding the wrong person. Just straight up. Okay? You allow God to maneuver and order the steps. That's another thing the Bible tells us. So when you talk about, like, you want Bible information so that you can apply it, it's there. It's just that we don't read it. See, if you don't read it, then you won't know. Okay? Because you just want, it's not going to just come out of the sky. You know, you have to read it in order to understand and then apply it. Okay? I mean, the Bible, you talk about, and same-sex marriage is what you all call it. Okay? The Bible tells us that that's an aberration. That's in Romans. It tells me that. It says man on man, woman on woman is not right. It point blank tells me that. But people don't know that. I had a young couple about a year and a half ago, and I was talking to them, and my bishop had spoke about against homosexuality. Now, he didn't talk about homosexuality as far as against the person. It's the behavior is what is wrong. So when the young lady come up to me and she said, well, how come he was so hard on that? I said, because it's in the Bible. And she said it was weird. So I showed it to her, and then her eyes went like, oh, my God. So again, you know, these things are there. It's just that folk don't understand and don't know. So therefore, now we come up with these laws because you're saying that it's new day, new day. It's a new day. It's 2017. It's a new day. But again, the Bible tells me there's nothing new under the sun.
So hold on before you say that.
I'm sorry.
Hi, welcome.
Hi, yes, I am.
Come on with a comment, question.
I justice for the people that are 5'3". Hi, I'm Tania. I'm listening to your comment too as well, and I first responded to you. I so agree with what you're saying for two reasons. For one, the Bible says that marriage is between a man and a woman, but in contemporary times, I don't think it's something wrong, and I like to hear other people's comment about this because I think about it a lot. I don't think it's anything wrong with like the legality of leaving your money to who you love, but I just don't think that it should be considered. It should be called marriage legally. You can call it whatever you want, but the word marriage comes from the Bible. So how can we?
That's exactly what I say all the time. I mean, we're all sinners. We're all sinners.
Aren't we?
Man on man, woman on woman. I'm not judging. I have friends that are homosexual that are very dear to me.
I love them dearly.
But just like you said, this is what I always say. If we want to make it a legal union between a man and a man, then call it a civil union.
Right.
I don't think we should just throw around the term marriage.
Right.
Because it is a sacred term. It's a sacred institution. And in the Bible, it clearly identifies what a marriage is.
A man
now,
and a woman.
society, we want to be able to create these unions for benefits and because, you know, these people love each other and they want to be together in the union, in the marriage. Unfortunately, in the Bible, that's not what a marriage is. Now, again, I have nothing against it, but I just don't think it should be called marriage. That's how I feel about it. I feel the same way you do.
And again, it goes back to what I was saying about it being a failed institute. All right? The question can be answered in 2 points. How do you get into a marriage? From a religious perspective, you have an elder, pastor, or someone married you. How do you get out of it? You get out of it with a judge, divorce lawyers, legal teams, alimony, and child support. That's it. You don't go to an elder or a pastor to get out of it. There's no Bible in the ending of a union between a person. So when I say to you that in terms of the reform, from start to finish, an overhaul of how you get in, how you get out, has to be conducted so that it's more consistent with not only the Bible. If you want to use it, you want to say that this is a union that's truly from the Bible, and what does the Bible say about the beginning and the ending of it? And let's do that only, with those parameters only, with a man and a woman only. 2017, that's not what's taking place right now. I'm telling you, man, in my lifetime, I got a few years left. If I see somebody walking down, putting a ring on a cat, I'm not going to be surprised.
Goodbye.
Not going to be surprised if they married a cat. I won't be alarmed.
Move on from that.
That's another show.
Right.
I won't be alarmed.
Antoine, you got something to say? Were you done?
Wait,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. When you talked about grandparents, I'm trying to remember because I was waiting. I think I want to hear your comment on what you have to say about this as well. Not only were our grandparents like 97 when they, were deceased, but talk about how early they got together, how early they got their act together. Because like it's so acceptable now to say, oh, I'm not gonna stop being promiscuous until I'm 30. Who made that rule up?
And it's funny that you came in on that
My
part.
grandparents were together since they were 16.
I was gonna say that. So you came a little late. We were kind of debating about that because
What's
he
the
said
debate?
that.
Oh no. What's the debate?
Listen, so we were having a discussion about Ken saying that at 18 you can get married now and that's too young, and to each his own. I personally think that it's your maturity. There are people that are 18 that could be more mature, and that is the same thing. My grandparents were together since high school, died still married. I think that the value in fighting for your relationship or working through it. Now, to say this as well, our grandparents, well, mine personally, been through some stuff. Somebody done cheated on somebody, and they let stuff slide a lot, and they just was like, you just going to be in the living room for a couple of days. Things happen, but I do think that, like you said, those times when they got married so young, some have gotten it together quickly, whereas now you're just getting married because it's like, all right, it's something to do.
And that's because of they understood what they were doing. They understood the sacredness of the marriage. See, when you understand the sacredness of the marriage, then you're not going to let just any little thing destroy your marriage, and you're going to lean on the sacredness. You're going to lean on God because of the fact that this is what He wants you to do. So therefore, as He say, order my steps, Lord. I'll trust you with all my heart. Lean not to my understanding. Acknowledge you and let you direct my path. See, it's those things that we don't get on. Walk in the spirit and not in the flesh.
Right.
See, when you're walking after your spirit, then that fleshly stuff won't disturb what God has put together. See, but we get caught up and we get away from that, and then now we want to say, well, it's 2017 or whatever we want to call it, and say, well, we can do this and we can do that. But that's not the spirit. See, now we're going to get deep. That's not the spirit. We wrestle not against flesh and blood is what the Bible tells us. We wrestle against spiritual wickedness. And that's what's infiltrating the marriage now. We're going to get down and get real.
No, you called it.
That's
exactly.
Every
marriage I've ever seen in my entire life.
And as we change the definition of the marriage, that wickedness grows more and more.
Every marriage I've ever seen in my entire life has had one or the other. And you please join in if you want to. Every marriage I've ever seen has had one or more of the two elements.
I have for Jen with the juice. I follow you a lot on your social media pages, so I really value your opinion. So with the Reverend is saying about marriage. Can you hear me good?
Yes.
I can hear you. Jam with the juice. Like when I made reference to my grandparents, they weren't married since they were teenagers because ideally that's illegal. It may not have been illegal back then, but when you say marriage, speaking of what did you say about how it's sacred? But before you get married, you have to think about your interaction with people. Do you just learn to realize that our relationship is sacred when we're married? If you do dirt until then, I don't want to marry you. Please let me get far away from this man who has done everything to me under the sun and think that marriage changes that. It's just that everything now is acceptable when it's totally it's everything in Pandora's box that is acceptable today. And I was directing this to you, but I'm like, Reverend, it's not. I don't want to say it's not the marriage. It is the marriage, but you have to prove to somebody before you get married. It's not only the woman. It seems like nowadays only the woman has to prove that.
Not necessarily.
I'm wifey material.
No,
not
oh no, honey. But it's acceptable for a man to cheat. Let's get.
Well, before we get on to that, let me get to the other person with the question, and we're gonna get to that.
I'm waiting for your information, your input, because I like your.
We're getting on that. I don't want to jump ahead because we got more questions and limited time.
I'm gonna go sit back down.
Okay.
I'm looking.
Yeah, I got a perspective.
Come on, Antoine. I want to hear what you have to say.
What was the question that you asked about the friends and the family?
Oh, when I said, is it advisable that you should have friends and family in your relationship?
What did you mean when you said in your relationship?
Commenting on your day-to-day.
So how much information do you share? If you have, for me personally, I don't think that and this is not with marriage relationships in general, if you're going through a really bad fight, I've had friends that you're fighting and then when you made up with them, I got to make up with them too. No, but the thing is, not just that, if there's an issue, not saying this happened, but just say hypothetically, I'm going through something, I'm not going to call my best friend, let me tell you what Anthony did today, oh my God.
Or just trying to take advice from.
Right, or just how involved do you think, is it okay? Hold on.
Go ahead. Let me readjust this for the tall people. I was thinking of something while this young lady was standing up here thinking. I think to a certain degree it's okay. It just depends on who. I can't take advice from a friend of mine that either has never been married and can't understand what I'm going through, or I wouldn't take advice from somebody that's been divorced 3 or 4 times, because obviously you got some work that you need to do, and I may be able to learn from your situations, but I don't feel like your advice is going to be, you know what I'm saying? I don't know how taking advice from you is going to really help. If you can't get your situation right, I've taken and had sit downs with the Woodsons, my wife and I, because we know them. We've known them for years. They're I don't know how Neil deals with her, but no,
what happened?
But we look up to them as a couple that when we were going through situations, we felt comfortable enough to reach out to them and talk to them and take in whatever advice that they were willing to give us. But then there's some couples that you can see that's just going through stuff over and over constantly. I can't take advice from you. That's
right.
like trying to buy a house from a person that's not a real estate agent, or trying to get advice on something in particular, and that person just isn't. No disrespect to this brother, but I can't go to this brother and get marriage advice.
No, you probably don't want to come
right,
here.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think it's okay, but you just have to understand who you're going to and what you're looking for out of that.
Okay.
And
thank you.
Now,
hi. Welcome. Hi. So I just I'm sorry. Yeah. They done set you up.
That's okay. So I just walked into the conversation, so I'm not sure if you guys cover this or not.
No, go ahead.
Take it off. I mean, I am a strong believer in the Lord. I have a deep relationship with Him, and I struggle with homosexuality in marriage because, God obviously calls us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. That is his greatest commandment. And I think the church puts a lot of emphasis on, like, homosexuals can't get married, or oh, you're homosexual, you need to remain abstinent. And I understand where that's coming from biblically, but I think what the church fails to recognize is sex outside of marriage. We're more willing to accept heterosexuals having sin outside of marriage. They're more accepted into the church. Like when they're walking in, it's like you can't see their problems as openly as you can see a homosexual sin. So, like, how can we address that more when heterosexual couples are able to kind of hide their sins more than openly, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Now, I know the elder's going to say sin is sin. It don't matter.
And that's just, sin is sin, right?
Yeah,
but that's my biggest struggle is, like, churches are so open to heterosexual couples and being like, you're welcome here, we'll help you. But when a homosexual comes in, like, it's not as accepted. You know what I mean? And, like, I really struggle with that. To every church I go to, they always have something to say about homosexuality, but never sex outside of marriage.
And moreover, just when the conversation from Christians comes and discusses homosexual behavior, they discuss, what I've seen more often than not, the intimacy part of it. When I know homosexual couples who aren't necessarily as physically romantic, but they love each other. There's a genuine love and care for each other. And I don't know if you feel like if it's natural to feel that way. If you love a person who's saying and you love them genuinely, when you hear from the church, they talk about the intimacy, the act itself, and they attach a derogatory sentiment to it. And I don't know if that should be the emphasis. Love is love. I mean, you can't help who you love. Right? Clearly, you can. If you would, you could, because you've chosen the most difficult path ever.
I'm gonna throw this out, but you're right, and I agree with you, and it's totally wrong for the church to do that. Right. We people are people, right. And we all are sinners, as they mentioned earlier. Right. We have to love everyone, but again, the behavior we have to not like. Just like a drug addict, I gotta love my drug addict brother or sister, but I got to hate that behavior. It's the same thing, you see. So churches disdain and they ostracize. I like to use that word. Because that's what churches do. And it ticks me off, to be quite honest with you, because I don't believe you are right. You put your hand up, I don't want to be affiliated. No, let's love our brother and sister.
Inclusion.
And we'll deal with whatever you're doing, by itself. But we got to love you. So I agree with you.
Hypocritically, too, Elder, with regards to the church and their view on it.
Yeah, you're right.
Because here,
absolutely.
you know the story. We don't need to put it out there, but there's a lot of hypocritical behavior across the board with regards to the church and their positions on homosexuality, fornication, and a lot. So when you look to them for strength and guidance in that arena, they fall short of the expectation. Where do you?
Well, it goes back to the heterosexual. Yeah. You're an adulteress. Bottom line, simple as that. Let's call it what it is, and that's what it is. So you don't catch a pass just because you are heterosexual and married, man, woman. You're still doing wrong. Right. It's still not right. God still is not pleased. Right. And it's the same. So, again, and that's just my view of that. I'm sure my wife would say the same. That's her view. Right. Because it's not right. Right is right and wrong is wrong. Right. I love to say that at my job. Because people think that you do favoritism, and it's not. Right is right and wrong is wrong.
So what do you do in 2017 when people of alternative lifestyles can walk into a church and be? How does a pastor, reverend, elder now perform these marriage unions?
Well,
and they do it in the name of God. What do you do?
Now you're going to put me on the spot.
Right,
I'm going to tell you, I can't perform the marriage. I can't perform it.
Yeah,
I can't perform it. Now, we can, if I see you, hey, how you doing? How's it going? If I know you, hey, what's happening? How you doing? We cool and everything like that. But I can't.
Pope says you should.
Yeah, that's the Pope.
Right.
That ain't God. Amen. Now watch it now. I take my orders from God. Amen.
I'm gonna move on from. Thank you so much. Thank you. I want to switch gears a little bit off of that. This is actually an audience question. I'll prefer to have a guy's and a woman's opinion on this. So, of course, step to the mic if you feel like you want to give your opinion. So I don't know how many of you about a couple months ago heard of the popular viral story hashtag Forever Duncan. Has anybody heard of that? No. Okay, let me enlighten you real quick. So there was this couple in which the man woke up that morning and proposed to his longtime girlfriend, and by the end of the day had an entire surprise wedding planned for her. So he proposed the way he, long story short, how he got away with it was made it like the dress, her friends, her family, everybody was in on it. Made it seem like she was going to her engagement shoot. Her father was there waiting. You know, it was on social. They've been on the news. They've been everywhere. Now, while everybody may not agree with it, there were some people that were like, "Oh, that's so sweet. You better get you a man like that." Where there were people like me that was like, "That's cute for them," but I didn't agree with it, and that's me personally. And I know we talked about this on Baltimore Flavor Radio before, where my personal opinion was because I think that, number one, my husband will agree, I'm not very controlling, but I like to control the situation, kind of, sort of. And I think that it kind of takes out of the...
You all right, compromise. You all right, baby? You all right? She looked over. She spoke and said, he will agree.
But, I mean, outside of taking away from the excitement and being able to plan your wedding and the bridal showers and the bachelor parties, to me, it takes away from, you didn't have marriage counseling. Like, it's like everything was done in 12 hours. So I kind of wanted to see what, for any ladies that want to address, would you be comfortable if your man planned your entire proposal? She's already shaking her head. Your proposal and your wedding.
Yeah, we're getting married tonight. Be ready.
Anybody want to co-sign it? Here we go.
Oh, I got to hear this.
Hello. I actually would think that would be okay because the way that the husband did it, he literally took all of her ideas off of her. She already had her whole wedding dream planned out like most of us girls, but hers was literally to the T. So he didn't miss a beat. I mean,
so you will find it like
I would find it absolutely romantic.
So you wouldn't feel like he took anything from you?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, because you do miss the time you and your mom and your girlfriends are going dress shopping and some of the intricate stuff about having a wedding being married. That part you would kind of miss. But overall, at the end, when you find out everybody was involved. That's just precious. You can't get that back. Like, you guys love me this much and wasn't even able to say a word for months. So I think that was kind of cool. Just because he found it to a T, so she didn't have to say, what kind of cake is this? He didn't miss a beat.
Okay. So the planning and all that kind of stuff is huge for you guys. You guys
absolutely.
Really, absolutely.
We know you.
I don't know.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Right, you don't even gotta say.
Yeah.
I want you might as well just pass it to them.
I figured I could just show up somewhere and say, come on, let's... What? Oh, stop with that foolish. See, that's what I ain't doing.
Hello. So, just so we're clear, my husband deaded all of that. Okay, so we got engaged. We were planning this big wedding, like huge wedding, whatever. One day he woke up and was like, what are we doing? Like, this wedding does not define who we are. We don't have to spend all this money, yada, yada, yada. Called the pastor. Pastor came to our house. We went around the corner at a gazebo, got married. Same day, hopped on a flight, and went on vacation.
I'm going to do that.
I'm gonna do that.
And guess what?
And how long y'all been married?
We've been married 8 years.
I'm going to do that.
Together for 13. We did counseling before. We did have relations before, but while we were doing the counseling, we deaded that too. Remember, we had a conversation about that. That was done. But it was the best thing I could ever did. Because it was like, I mean, it kind of, my parents weren't there, my son wasn't there, but they were happy for us because that's just what we wanted to do. Yeah. And we always talk about, hey, 10 years, we could do like a little reception or something like that because we didn't even have our girlfriends there. Only person that was there was a photographer because I actually did have a dress because he did buy me a dress. So it was just a photographer, the pastor, me, and him. So,
and that's what works for you.
And,
yeah. Yeah, how long was your engagement before y'all did that?
We got engaged, it was like a year and a half.
Okay. Yeah.
It was like a year and a half, and then we did, I think, about 8 months of counseling.
Oh, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
You had everything.
Yeah, my pastor didn't play that.
Right.
He was like,
right. But see, that's, you solidified the point because you had everything in place. It's just that all of a sudden your fiance husband said, let's just rock and roll. We'll catch up with everybody else later on.
That's exactly. He
it.
woke up that morning, had
the
epiphany, and was like, you know what? We just going to do this. We already had the marriage license.
Save thousands.
So
he said save thousands.
Saved a lot. I got 2 new cars out of it. I was good.
Antoine, you got a comment? Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Like Jen said, it was cute for them. It wouldn't have worked with my wife. I already know, so that wouldn't even have been an option. But I just think that the average man, when it comes to all of that planning and stuff, if they're like me, they just kind of gave the credit card or gave the bank card and said, let me know what time, let me know the place, let me know where I got to go rent my tuxes from, and so on and so forth, and we just show up. So kudos to the brother for doing all of that, but like the average, because I don't know about you, and
I was going to say, you think you could have planned our wedding?
No, exactly. And the average man is probably like that same thing. Like my wife would tell you, I showed up on the day, had the time, and that was pretty much it. So it was cool for them, but nah.
What's the?
You don't do that either, man.
What's that? I like that, bro. You just look, man. You know,
I'm talking about the same day.
He said, "Look, you busy. Let's go."
Got time between lunch and the next assignment. Got the ring.
So my next question, which can be for anybody, but I'm gonna start with you. Are you comfortable with being with someone who's been married multiple times?
No.
That's a good question. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think if 2 people are supposed to be together, then the path that they took to get there, I don't think is really that important. I think what happens between those 2 people now and moving forward is what's important. So I would say, yeah, I could do that. I could do that.
So you're the single one.
Been married a couple times.
You
love, I tell you, love forward. And Brother David said it right. You gotta love forward. And guess what? I'm hoping that the previous relationship strengthened them, taught them some things. But I guarantee you that the counseling, in my opinion, shouldn't stop when you get married. Seeing the elder, it shouldn't stop. Like at least once a month, or you should be going in. Where are you? Where are we? What are we up to? How are we doing? How are you dealing with? It just shouldn't stop. Marriage is forever. The training should be forever. The learning should be forever. And that's something that has to be a factor if you're going to be successful in it. What do we feel about polyamory? People who get, what happened?
Oh, you're not going to jump on my show and ask the questions. You just answer yours. Well, since you got the mic, my next question is, I think everybody on the stage has children, correct?
I do.
So what advice would you give? You have a daughter or son?
Daughter and son.
Yeah. Do you give your daughter and son the same advice?
You know what? I tell you something. It was a difficult conversation because they literally said to me, "Well, Dad, how are you in a position to give me advice when you've never been married?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to tell you what I would do if I had to do all over again. Is that you truly want to take your time, get to know a person before you do make the mistakes that I made. I learned from mine, and I can give it to you. That's where I'm beneficial to you because it wasn't a good thing. It was hard raising them." Not being married to their mom. It was very difficult going back and forth. And you don't want to do that if you don't have to. Okay. So the mistake I made would have probably been in the intimacy part with your mama. But ultimately, you definitely want to take your time because it's hard. They saw how difficult it was.
Okay.
You can ask me a question? About kids? Please, I got the answers. Come on.
Why do you automatically assume that the answer or the resolution would have been... Why don't you say that you should have married their mom instead of not being intimate?
We tried. We did. And when I say
you tried to get married?
We did. We tried to walk down that path and just we bumped heads so often it just wasn't a working situation. When I tell you right now that it was probably for the best, because what the kids would have seen was a very, very destructive union. And thank God that we waited long enough, after they were born, and to do that evaluation. If we got, and to this day we agree. He's one of my best friends now, because we agree that we can be in each other's space for about 15, 20 minutes, and it's probably best if we part. So.
Did y'all have counseling?
No, we were.
Because I keep hearing the Reverend.
I was 19. I was 19 and 20 when we had these babies. I was a young man, very young.
We said my
and counseling wasn't available then.
Her grandparents were young.
I will say this: too young to be married, and definitely too young to be involved in that.
But
level
that goes back to again, at least you know that it wasn't gonna work. For you guys having children, children, and you have one that's recently engaged. What advice do you give your daughter?
I hope that as she growing up, that she followed her mother's imprint. I had one daughter, and I always tell her I gave her everything that I could give her as a mother to pass on. So I hope she did follow some of my advice that I gave, because I talk to her all the time. So, and as far as with the son, I said the same things to him. So that he would know how to treat a woman.
I'm curious to know the same question, but because you do, because you are elder and your daughters, is your advice still the same, or is it a little personal because, that's your baby girl?
I keep going back to your show name, Keep It Real, and I like to think I keep things real. I just tell her the dangers, from a man's perspective, because I wasn't always an elder, and so I give her the dangers of what to look out for, what to see, who to be. As far as you are a queen, you deserve the best, nothing less. When she was 16, I gave her a ring, and I don't know what they called it, but I just gave her a ring, and this was because of the fact I expect you, well, my wife just says commitment ring, but God just told me, give her a ring because this is what she needs to expect. We always try to give her the best because you need to be treated as the best. So that's pretty much the advice that I've given her, and I think that she has adhered to the advice. We're pleased with how she's developing and growing. She has a great head on her shoulders. We also taught her to be independent. Don't just take anything from anybody. You speak what you believe. Speak what's on your mind. Because you are an independent woman now. Yeah, when you become married, you become the one, but you're still independent. And that might sound kind of like a oxymoron, but it is the truth, because you still have to have your own identity. Because you are a woman. You are strong. You got to be a strong woman. Right. Because if you're not a strong woman, then you're gonna just get walked over, and then the marriage is not gonna work, because you're gonna be upset, angry, and not your self-esteem is gonna go, which happens to so many people.
I want to kind of not get my opinion, not to be too personal with my own life, but I will say this, because it goes back to when we were talking about earlier, like if your environment or what you grew up and what you saw affects, your marriage or your relationship. My parents were married. They got divorced when I was young, but I honestly say, and I always joke with my husband, like, I don't know my parents as being married, but like I've seen a great relationship between the both of them. My mom instilled, those values in me to be the woman I am, and my dad the same thing. He always used to joke and say, I think God gave me a girl because how wild I was, because I have an older brother. But I do believe that, even though I didn't, most people, not saying all, most people don't grow up nowadays in a two-parent household. Right. But I don't think that should determine, how you will be in your future, relationships necessarily. So I do like, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, since my mom in Orleans, didn't I get one of them rings too when I was younger? Yep. So it is kind of good to hear that the fathers are talking about that with their daughters. You have a son, my stepson. What advice would you give Terrell?
I've had this discussion with him, and And just like I said earlier, don't rush into anything. Make sure this is the right person, because once you find this right person, the joy is unlimited.
How old is he?
But he's 28. The joy is unlimited, but along with that comes the strength to be able to fight the enemy, exactly, because the enemy is going to come in all shapes and forms. It's going to come by way of infidelity, trust is going to come, finances, little arguments over little things that can blow up into big things. So I always tell them, don't rush into anything. Now he has given me 3 beautiful grandkids, and he's not married. I'm not happy about that part, but my grandbabies are my heart, and so is he. So I always tell them, just make sure you find the right person and get married for the right reason. There was a time before he had his first child, he was going to marry the girl because she was pregnant. And we had a discussion. I don't think that my discussion with him changed his mind. I think he was a little leery about it anyway, and I think his girlfriend was pressuring him. And I just told him, I said, this is not something that you take for granted. This is not something that you can do and consider in the future you may be able to get a way out. That's not how you think about marriage. So if I was to have this discussion with him again, I would have the exact same discussion. Don't rush into it. Make sure it's the right person, and take your time.
Thank you. So my very, very last question before we all get out of here is for each and every individual person. Can make it asked. Under 60 seconds.
I'm glad you asked.
So my question is, and even though you are not married, I still want you to answer this first, because sure. I value your opinion.
Thank
and
you.
Your experience. So
value.
My question for everyone on the stage is back to the title of the show. What is the good that you think is in marriage? Right. What do you think is the bad? Not necessarily personally in your own life, but what can be the bad? Right. And what is the real? As in something that, well, for most people on the stage, something that you didn't really realize until you got married. That was the real of it. But for you, what you would think it would be.
Okay. So if you find the right partner, you've got a companion for lifetime, and as you grow older, you absolutely will need that companion to sustain yourself. Just 2 incomes are better than 1. Having somebody to help you change your depends is important when you get older, right? Fact is, true stuff, right? The bad is that there's not nearly enough that goes into the institute to get you being able to get married to help most people be successful at it. And the real is that you do have people like the elder who are committed to making sure that unions last.
The good about marriage is that, you have a lifelong partner to go through ups and downs with. One of my favorite things, and we talked about this the other night, we're both really busy. We spend a lot of time with each other during the day, but a lot of times it's in busy mode. When we get in bed at night and we're just cuddled up looking at TV, it's the simplest thing in the world. But it's like our peaceful time. It's our peaceful time, and I enjoy that more than anything. That's good. That's some of the good things about marriage. I don't know. I can't say too much bad about marriage. I think people make marriage bad, but to me, there's nothing really bad about marriage. So I don't really want to comment on that part. But the real, you got to give up some stuff. And I struggle as we've been together for 8 years, been married 4 years. It's still things that I struggle with, and compromise is one of them. And just a quick example, Nicole or Jen with the juice will sometimes, ask me to do something, and sometimes I just want to take my time about doing it, And so she'll like last night this happened. She shove it, just as to say, don't forget. And I'm like, what is this for? And I put it back because I just feel like I'm going to do this on my own time. And that's one thing that
get out of here.
That's one thing that I struggle with. And so
oh no.
I do great. I do great in a lot of areas, but that's one area that I kind of struggle with, and not all the time. I've learned to compromise a lot, but there's some things that I still kind of, and you're always going to struggle with certain things. But again, when you're one and you value your relationship and your commitment, you'll make it through it. So
I appreciate your honesty.
Yep.
Miss Jean.
I'm just wondering about that question. We got married at 19. We've been married 36 years. It'll be 37 this year. I think the beautiful part is that we grew from adolescent to young adults to older adults, and we're still going. We're still in love. We still hold hands. We still punch each other and tell jokes. The thing about keeping it real is keeping it real. You know, understanding that I have wants, he has wants, he has needs, and I have needs. But always stay as one. Like he said, always stay as one. And that's what keeps us together this time and day and age.
And my wife really, she hit it right on the head. So I'm just going to try to fly through. Good is that God is involved and love is there, and it's a beautiful thing. When you find that person, and I shared with the brothers before the show, I can truly say after all that we've been through that I know without a doubt that I love this woman. And that's where the power comes in, and that's the good. And I could even say I know without a doubt that she loves me. And so that's the good, and I'll even say great, you know. And that's what's the beauty about this relationship, you know, because I can let her get away with that. And you catch it how I said it? Yeah, okay. the bad is, and I kind of like agree with Anthony. I'm not sure there's any bad, because even when you're going through bad times or difficult times, you know, what the devil means for evil, God turns it around for the good. So therefore, it works in the marriage for the good, right? Because it strengthens you and it helps, as my wife said, you grow together. So I'll leave that at that. And the real is that when we first got married, and everybody, when you get married, you think it's a fairy tale. And the real deal is, nah, baby, it ain't no fairy tale. It's far from it. It's real life situations, and you just got to get down. And as I'll say the young people, they say, it's ride or die. They still saying that. All right? And that's how you have to take it with your marriage. Amen.
All right now. Well, I want to thank all of you for participating 100%. I want to thank the audience for coming out and appreciate your input. And that is all we have for Sipping with Jim Live. So I appreciate you all. Everybody have a great night.